Alright, so this is a shot that you would play when you're in relative control over the rally. You've anticipated your opponent's drop shot or their net shot, and catching the shuttle early, moving it cross-court to the other side of the net. The strategical advantage of this shot is that your opponent's going to have to deal with a shuttle that's moving laterally across the court, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult to play a net shot or a lift. Alright, take a look at it again, this time in slow motion. You can see that as I'm preparing for this shot, I'm poaching the net because I've anticipated my opponent's drop shot or their net shot, catching it really high at the top of the net, and then changing the direction of the shuttle very quickly. In order to pull off this shot successfully, I have to make sure that my racket head is flat and not giving the shot away. So then as I come in, it makes it look like I'm going to play something straight, whether it's a net shot or a lift. And then I quickly turn the racket head and move it cross court. Let's briefly look at the footwork you need to know to execute this shot. I cover this in a little bit more detail in a separate video for footwork into the backhand corner, but for now just take a look. The main thing you have to consider for the footwork into this backhand net corner is that your lunge has to be strong and your body has to be solid. Because after you play this shot, you need to be able to get back to the center and recover properly. And also, as you're executing the shot, the more solid your body is, the better your shot will be. Alright, here we'll go over the technical aspect of executing this shot. Number one, notice that my racket comes up really high. I bring up my racket and my arm from my shoulder and try to contact the shuttle at the highest point possible. The other thing that you'll notice is that as I'm preparing to make this shot, I'm spreading out my arm so that it gives me a lot of balance, and my non-racket arm is reaching out behind because it helps me to execute the shot. It also keeps my center of gravity a little bit further back, so it makes recovery back to the center a little bit easier. Again, watch it from the side angle. You'll notice that I lift up my racket from my shoulder, my arm is completely straight, and I'm reaching the head of the racket as far as possible so that I give my opponent less time. Alright, let's isolate the stroke. You can see that, again, I'm reaching up as high as I can, my shoulder is up, my racket is about shoulder height, and my wrist is dropping as the racket head is turning sideways. This wrist movement is what you're going to want to master in order to execute the shot properly. You can see I'm not doing anything with my elbow. My elbow stays extended, and the only thing that's changing is my wrist angle. So my racket stays up, and then as I go to execute the shot, my shoulder drops. That brings the handle of my racket down. As the racket handle comes down, I flip my wrist, and that should turn your racket sideways. If you have your racket handy, follow along with me and practice the stroke. So your arm should be fully extended, racket points out, drop your shoulder, and then turn your wrist so it flips the racket. So down and flip, down and flip. Don't use the flat side of your thumb. Make sure that you're using the side of the thumb when you're holding the racket. This grip will help to keep your strings pointing upwards when you execute the shot. If you use the flat side of your thumb, it'll end up turning your racket so that the strings end up facing forward, which could cause an unforced error, or pushing your net shot off the net, making it easier for your opponent to return the shot. So practice holding the grip like this. It's essential that your hand stays loose and relaxed around the grip. So there's two steps to executing this shot. The first is to bring the handle down by dropping your shoulder, like this. Make sure your arm stays extended. Do nothing else other than drop your shoulder down. The second step is flipping the racket sideways. So here's both steps combined. Handle comes down and the racket flips sideways. My recommendation is that you practice this over and over again just by doing this action without a shuttle. It's also a good idea to practice the action without a racket like this. Just remember that strokes are generated by the wrist and the arm, so if you can't do it without a racket, then you'll definitely not be able to do it with a racket. Repeat this action over and over again until you get tired. Take a break and do it again, and do it every day until you've mastered the movement. Then put your racket in your hand and do the same thing and make sure the action is correct. At the point of contact, your wrist should be at a right angle, because that'll ensure that the racket head is perfectly vertical and pointing in the direction you need the shuttle to travel. Alright, let's freeze it for a second and talk about the point of contact. So my wrist is at a right angle, and the face of my racket is perfectly flush. When you come to practicing this shot, if you find that the shuttle keeps going into the net, it means that the racket face is pointing too much towards the net, so make sure that the racket angle is flush. So here I'm pointing out that the racket needs to be perfectly vertical. If it's a little bit horizontal, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to play the shot, so the closer you can get to the shuttle, the better. Make sure you get your racket to the outside of the shuttle before you make contact. Don't contact it when your racket is horizontal. Alright, we'll finish off by watching the shot in real time. So that's it. If you liked this video and you want to learn more, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.